Hello people, I'd like to share with you something I bought not too long ago. This is a Plinius SA-50 amplifier. It's quite old, it's quite an old amplifier now. It was made around 1994, I think it was about April. If you actually open it up and look inside, the circuit board inside is actually dated 1993. So anyway, this is an amplifier that you don't see very often on YouTube. Bit of a shame really. It was regarded as quite a good amplifier in its time and still is today. This is a Class AB and Class A amplifier. One of the first Class A amplifiers that Plinius made, that their future SA range was based on. This is the Mk1 version, so you'll notice compared to the Mk2 and Mk3, there were three Mk versions. The heat sinks are distinctively different to the Mk2 and Mk3. They're flatter, not as compact. And if you look around the back, the Mk2s and Mk3s had two sets of binding posts and also carry handles, front and rear. The Mk2s and Mk3s were heavier than the Mk1, mostly because I think on the Mk3s they had two transformers inside them in the base as opposed to only one in the Mk1, and I think the Mk2 only had a single transformer as well. So like I said, this is a Class A and Class AB amplifier. I believe it's a pure Class A, simply because although it's a modest power rating, which is 50 watts per channel into 8 ohms and 100 watts per channel into 4 ohms, the actual power draw at its highest is 650 watts. So if you do the figures, I think it pretty much puts it in the category of a pure Class A, and the manual also states it's a pure Class A as well. The great thing about this amplifier too is it can be bridged. There is a switch on the back which I'll show you. So you'll see it's called an ACS selector, and you'll notice the amplifier has XLR and RCA inputs, so the ACS selector takes into account all those different modes of operation. So as a stereo amplifier you can use the RCAs or XLRs and the normal speaker outputs. And when you switch it into bridged mode, what happens is the positive terminal of the speaker goes here and the negative terminal of the speaker goes here. So the speaker sits across both channels in bridged mode, and then you use either the right channel RCA or the right channel XLR to connect it in bridge mode, and obviously you need two amplifiers to do so. So on the front you have the power switch, and this is a mute switch, so if you make any changes to your preamplifier or source or whatever, then you just flick it up into mute while you make any changes. And this switch here in the up position is for Class AB mode, which is obviously a very cool running mode. And if you wanted to use it in Class A, you flick the switch down and the amplifier very rapidly gets very hot. So you need quite good ventilation when you have it in Class A mode. And it takes some time to warm up as well. I find about half an hour before the sound starts to improve from the Class AB quality. After a couple of hours it's pretty good. I do notice it goes through a bit of a phase where it sort of gets a bit scratchy, sort of groans a bit as it's heating up into Class A, but after a few minutes of passing through that phase it's very, very good. Most of the time I just run it in Class AB. I'm not really critically listening. Every now and again I'll use it in Class A mode. Now at this stage I don't have a preamplifier, a standalone preamplifier that will run it properly. At the moment I'm just using the single-ended RCA outputs out of my integrated amplifier, which is also a Plinius. It's actually an 8150 integrated. Obviously the performance of the preamp is nowhere near what you'd have with a proper standalone preamp. So I'm looking forward to the day when I can afford to purchase one. And yeah, what's even better than having just one of these amplifiers? I actually own two of them, consecutive serial numbers. They were a matched pair from the factory. So I'm just showing you one of these today. So let's have a look inside. And here we are. Now when I bought these amplifiers not too long ago, they had been serviced by Plinius a few years before. I had the paperwork from the previous owner. Being a Mk1, you may be able to see it, maybe not, but the Mk1s had Furukawa speaker cable wiring. Don't know if you can see that there. I think the Mark II and Mark III changed to Siltec wiring, which Plinius, I believe, felt it produced a better sound. These capacitors, they're 50 volt ones, 10,000 microfarad. There's 4 of them there. I think the Mark IIs and Mark IIIs had a higher voltage capacitor, but with the same microfarad rating, capacitance rating. At some point, because of the age of the amplifier, I will get the amplifier serviced because it is upwards of 25 years old. I'll look at getting probably higher voltage capacitors. I think it's pretty well borderline really using 50 volts in this amplifier because of the rail voltage. I had that recommended to me as well by a amplifier service person, that they probably should have higher voltage capacitors in them. So you can see the back of the ACS selector there. So that's the left channel. Now the interesting thing about Plinius amplifiers, which are pretty much right through their range, is they don't use a complementary pair of transistors, meaning that in a lot of amplifiers they use NPN and PNP transistors combined in each channel. This is known as quasi-complementary, where instead Plinius chose to use NPN transistors in the channels. The reason why they do that, they believe that it gives a sound, a better sound, more like vacuum tubes. I think they say really just a better sound quality than using a mixture of types of transistors. My integrated is also the same, it uses all NPN. So I think you can see there are 8 transistors per channel. Now in bridged mode, it's recommended that the amplifier has speakers no less than 8 ohms. because I can imagine if you are placing too low an impedance speaker across the entire amplifier array, it's a bit hard on the amplifier to drive 4 ohms, especially as 8 ohm speakers would probably dip a bit too through their frequency range. And as I mentioned, I don't know if you can see it here, but let's see if I can get a shot of this. So this circuit board is dated 1993, so it is a fairly new board revision. It's probably not one of the early Mark 1s. It's probably when they were changing over to Mark 2 that this amplifier was made. I think they started making these amplifiers about 1988, and 1994 was around the time that the Mark 2s were coming out. And then I think they stopped making these amplifiers around about 99 in the Mark III version. That was the end of it. A lot of people like the SA-50 because being Class A as well, it was also a low-powered Class A. A bit more realistic power consumption in Class A mode than the SA-100 and so on. Especially in bridged mode, if you had 2 of these, that's 200 watts per channel coming out of these. Well, what I'm saying is each amplifier will put out 200 watts into the speaker it's connected to in bridged mode, is actually what I mean. So 200 watts into 8 ohms for each amplifier is pretty good. And being in bridged mode, as monoblocks, then each amplifier's driving a speaker. You don't have that thing about the power supply being shared by 2 channels. So I quite like that idea, that's why I bought them. I will have to upgrade my speakers at some point. They're pretty enjoyable to listen to, but they certainly can't take advantage of the power and finesse that these amplifiers put out. But my first priority is to get a better preamp. So that is it. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.